I'm sure I'm going to be your only guy on this podcast referencing like psychedelic.
No, this is good. I didn't
Like
realize we are going here. We could have done a
I
whole
didn't either.
psychedelic
This was
episode.
not.
I just
Yeah,
didn't know.
we're like session notes, 3D movement and strength, and now we're talking about like these spiritual experiences, right?
What's up, Pushin Performance family? Welcome back. Don't worry, I'm just riding solo for the intro. Our boy JT's going to be with us with our interview guest today, Nate Gharam, the Director of Performance over at Rokke. Prior to this role, Nate was an Exos Performance Specialist and a performance coach with basketball at Warner Pacific University. And Nate has worked with really everyone across the athletic spectrum from youth to professional. And in today's conversation, we get into a whole host of topics, basically everything from philosophy to psychedelics to 3D movement and strength. So buckle up. It's going to be a really, really, really fun conversation learning about Nate and the really interesting way that he looks at performance training as a whole. Let's get to it. I never know the right way to say I've been looking through your Instagram without sounding like the weirdest person in the world. I think I said that to one of our guests, Amy Nguyen. I was like, yeah, I've just been like looking through your Instagram for the past couple of days, and then I just paused and I was like, that's weird.
It's worse saying it to a girl, probably.
Probably worse.
You're just
probably.
Like,
she was like she's definitely a little creeped out. But I have
do some 3 a.m. studying sometimes. Cool. Accidentally liking. Sorry.
Yeah.
But I have been looking through your gram, and it seems like, and in knowing you a little bit, it seems like you take a pretty philosophical approach to coaching and training. And one thing that JT and I both love to do is pull concepts from thinking and business and art and all these different places, and bring it back into the training space. At least the things that we find valuable. But when you think about it, like how does all this stuff, philosophy, things outside of training, how does that influence you or impact you as a coach and what you do?
Yeah, I think let's start off with a deep question, right? Like in life we're here to help others, and in a certain way we're like trying to help them find themselves, right? So like training's a conduit for me to be able to help people do that, and create challenging environments and situations where they can like figure out who they are, obviously, like at the end of the day, the job is making people more athletic or improving certain qualities that they need to improve on so they can play their sport and compete at a high level. But for me, there's like a deeper calling to it where I'm able to connect with the individual and help them just progress as people.
Yeah. I love it. Does that come from like a coach who helped you, your personal experience with training? Like where did that thought, that feeling, that want come from?
I don't know. It just like, I just kind of found it. I think, I've obviously had coaches along the way in my own athletic career, but a lot of times I've felt like I had to kind of figure it out on my own. I look at some of the athletes now, and they have skills trainers, they got performance coaches, they have access to everything, and these people supporting them all the time. I remember like biking to the college community center and sneaking in because I didn't have a membership, or I was in high school and high school kids weren't allowed. And I would bike like 3 miles there. I would spend 6-7 hours, and then I would bike home. Like that was my summer every day. And now it's like, hey, someone like drives out to me, I give them 90 minutes of like more than just your basic training session. And then they're off to their skills coach, and then they go to some other person that's opening a gym for them. And like for me, I was like sneaking into places to be able to do some of what they get. And so, like I look at like, oh, I wish I had this as a kid. And how can I provide that for the next generation of people that are coming up and chasing their dreams, essentially, right? Because like, I think it's Dame said like the greatest gift is not just like shining your light on other people, but helping them find their own light so they can kind of move it along as they progress and grow older.
Man, that's deep right there. How do you do that? Like, what does it look like in a session and a series of sessions? Like, what is it that allows you to, was it find their light, help them find their light?
Yeah, I think part of it is like getting to know the athlete, and even that's not said the right way. It's getting to know them as the human, right? Because we're training, people first, and they play a sport, and they're competing in a sport, but that's not who they are. And so you got to like figure out who they are beyond just, so and so the basketball player, or so and so the volleyball player. A lot of times it's just like striking up conversation as we're going through the training session, and obviously we have a limited amount of time to get a certain amount of work done, and so like we can't just socialize the whole time, but you kind of pick and choose and find moments and start to dig in and like peel the layers of the onion back, so to speak, and figure out, who are they, right? And I think that allows me to get a better sense of like, what do they need from me in the session? I mean, like, what role do I need to play? Do they have enough adult figures and leadership figures in their life that I can kind of like sit back and like let them come to me, or do they need, me to kind of like set more boundaries for them and push them a little bit harder because they don't have those other type of relationships, right? And it's figuring out, and learning about the athlete.
Man, that's so good. That the topic of identity has been top of mind for me lately. So this is a really good, thought provoking sentiment, I would say, and something I've been trying to think about a little bit more lately is like people in general pop and their identity, and like what you mentioned, the athletes aren't the basketball player themselves, but it's who they are, and they just happen to play basketball. So same with the corporate athlete. I'm going to coin that term. Their title is who they are, and that's what they pride themselves with. How do you navigate that if they actually do pride themselves as that title, and is that something you would still peel back with?
Totally. Yeah. I would say, that's a great example. That's in some ways it's the same thing, like I'm the CEO, or I'm the director, I'm whatever. Like people start to identify with certain labels and associating value with that, right? And I think the thing we want to get away from is like there's no fulfillment in like self-love and only deriving value from a title and like something that was achieved, right? Like and it just goes into like the whole cliche saying like the journey is like what's important. It's not about the outcome. Like if I'm going, hey, I'm the director and that's why I'm valuable, right? And I get fired, or I just take a new job and it doesn't come with that title. Well, now I'm going to go through some sort of like identity crisis or self-value crisis because I've been associating the value with that external just name, right? And really, it's like being respectful of the importance of that title to the person, while maybe like planting seeds of like conversation, surrounding like self appreciation and self love, right? And a lot of these athletes are young versus more corporate athletes, right? That maybe have been doing it for a long time, and maybe they're older than us, right? So like in the case of the younger athlete, maybe they don't know anything outside of the sport they play because that's just like consume them, right? So like some of the questions we introduce are around like, what do you like to do outside of the sport? You know, like what are other interests
Yeah.
that you have? And it's not to like downplay the importance of the sport, but it's to give them like an outlet, because some kids are so consumed by their sport that they don't realize like they're holding on too tight, and that's impacting their performance, right? And if you could just like let go a little bit, you're probably going to play better. You know, you think of what's the curve, right? Like the excitement like awareness curve, right? Where you could be like way too high on one side and it's going to cause like tunnel vision, or you could not be up enough or excited enough and you're too relaxed going into, you know, competition. That those opposite sides can have negatives to performance, right? Like some of these kids are so dialed over here and excited that it's like you don't realize you got to let go a little bit, and you're actually going to play better. Like they think their center is actually far right, you know what I mean? It's like, no, man, like dial it. And in the same way in like the corporate wellness space, right? Like those corporate athletes might be so like revved up and like caffeinated and focused on like whatever this project is that they're doing, that their blinders are on to how their staff is doing, how they're feeling, how they're treating their family, and they need to kind of dial it back. And so like it's just like, how can we bring awareness to that through questions and curiosity without being offensive, right? Because if you tell a guy like, bro, who cares that you're CEO? They're going to be like, what? You know, like, all right, next trainer, you know, like, yeah.
No, that's really good. It's just trying to find their optimal state of arousal, and when you say dial back, what does that look like? How do you, what are questions you've asked for the athletes to do that?
God, you guys are hitting me with all the great questions, that lots of thought. You know, I think it's like, it's hard to give a specific example other than like driving curiosity from like my perspective to the athlete about what they're going through and experiencing, and at the same time using that to kind of motivate their own curiosity to start asking questions to themselves, right? Because like I can ask these things, and if you know they reflect momentarily with me, like that's a win, but like the goal would be to drive their own awareness internally so they can start regulating and understanding their own internal states that are impacting performance, right? And you know, you think about some of the like, you know, some of the Exos resources that have been provided around like self motivation, as well as the breath work, things that have been produced, at least back when I was at like the Intel account, right? I don't know if I could say that, but back when I was in the
hell you want, bro.
Okay, back when I was in the corporate account, right? We had all these resources about how to understand when I'm stressed, how the stress is impacting me, and then what are things that I can do to down regulate the stress, right? And that might be breath work, that might just be like taking a moment to go move my body, right? But it's just questions that will come up that can drive awareness to those things, you know, applicable to the younger, or you know, the young athlete, whether they're high school or college or professional.
Yeah. That's that on. You said it, awareness, right? Like how can we help? How can we help these athletes, these people that we work with, just become aware, right? And not be on autopilot, or not be like, hey, I'm a basketball player, I got to do X, Y, and Z every day. Like become more aware of how we're feeling, what we're thinking, why we're doing what we're doing, and switching gears slightly, but still staying deep on them. You mentioned identity, right? And I think a lot of coaches' identity is that of a coach, right? Which I would think has pros and cons. But you know, for someone like yourself who is a coach, how do you manage that for yourself and not fully identify as like, this is what I do, I'm a coach, but like see the, you know, have values outside of just your job title and what you do?
Yeah, I think I still in some ways struggle with that, and am trying to continue to grow. You know, I think about a year and a half ago, I started doing jujitsu and being coached by other people, and that takes me out of the coach role. And you got people all around me that'll kick my ass and are far more skilled than me, and that I can lean on. I think that's a good thing. You know, it, Parenting in some ways is kind of like coaching. It's not coaching sport, but it's coaching life. And you're raising kids, and so like in that sense, like I kind of dabble back and forth. Marriage is not like coaching at all. So leaning into that, they're like, hey, it's the opposite. I do not want to hear that from you, even if I'm right. And, so that humbles me. But I think, it's finding interests outside of just the career, right? Which we're all really passionate about it. So it's easy to kind of ride that. Like, I want to learn more. I want to take these courses. I want to improve my craft. And, some of that comes from personally, like wanting to be really good at what I do, but also wanting to be, better than I was before to offer more to the guys that I'm working with.
Yeah.
Right. And it's, in some ways, we talk about work-life balance, and, there is kind of finding some of that balance, but I don't think it's a 50-50. It's like, one, how good do you want to be at what you do? That really impacts it. And then like, how do the things in your life that you care about, like, what do they need? What can you offer them? And not neglect those things in order to still be as good as you want to be in what you're doing.
Yeah. Ooh, I know we might have a few coaches listening, or just people listening here that are parents or new parents too. So, what are like concepts that you've taken from coaching that applies really, really well with parenting?
Man, I got two girls that are just, they push me to be great every day. So, man, I think enthusiasm, right? Like, you can't come to a training session with shitty energy. Right. I'm sure you guys have heard the idea that there's two people, right? Fountains and drains, right? Like,
Ooh, I haven't heard
kind
that
of
one.
always, oh, you haven't, right? So
That's a good
you
one.
either produce energy or you drain energy from people, right? And in our jobs, we definitely got to be fountains. In that same way, you step through the door, the kids don't care, that you did like 8 coaching hours straight. And no breaks, and like you're eating food on the floor in between a session, right? Like, they don't care. They're like, dad's home. I taught my youngest how to do some jujitsu moves, and she like jumps on my back and tries to choke me out. It's like, I better be happy for that, or else, they're gonna get really pissed off. Yeah, no, seriously, she'll be like, tapped 3 times, or else I'm not letting go.
She's gonna take you down all the way.
Dude, she's tiny. She's 6. She's really small, and she has the cleanest rear naked choke.
There you go.
Like, I can't, she's pretty savage.
Got a few for the sport.
Yeah. No, I took them to do a class a couple weeks ago, and I'm lucky in who my coaches are. And one of our female coaches is, she's in her early 20s, and for her age and weight class, she'll be like one of the best in the world. Like, she's going to go compete in the world games and have a chance to win. And she's like, yeah, I'll do a session for your kids. My kids have no idea who's teaching them. And they're just like, whatever, like, we're here, and teach me how to do this choke. And they want to show her the X choke and whatnot. And it's like, man, you guys don't know how lucky you are, and I'm like thanking her. Thank you so much, but yeah, like, enthusiasm for family and kids, right? You need to, like, I've been thinking about this a lot from a training standpoint, and this is, I'll bring it back to kids, is like, periodization is great and progression over time. But I think there needs to be a level of variety and variability, or else session flow can be kind of stagnant and boring, right? And in the same way, you kind of got to bring new experiences to your kids. you can't just do the same thing over and over again. Like it just loses its novelty and excitement. You're like, oh, we're going to do that again, you know? So those are things, enthusiasm and some variety and
Yeah.
just attention and like being present with client or kids, you
Yeah.
know?
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, training, coaching, everything in this human performance space, you know, the way you speak about it, like really truly makes it feel like it's all just kind of a microcosm of life.
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
man. It's okay. So here's some like, this will seem kind of random. I'll try to bring it back. This is stuff I've been thinking about a lot.
Oh, you're good. Go off. Go off.
There's some yeah, there's some quotes by a guy named Ram Dass. I don't know if have you guys heard of Ram Dass?
I don't think so.
Okay, so he's a part of like the Harvard like they did psychedelic research at Harvard in like the 70s or maybe it's the 60s, right? And three dudes, one who renamed himself Ram Dass later on, they all got kicked out of Harvard because they were running these experiments and they were taking the hallucinogens with the students that they were doing the experiments on, right? And then this is back when like this stuff was legal to do. Shortly after sweeping Psychedelics Act comes in and Harvard's like, nah, we can't do this anymore. They fire these guys. Anyway, this guy becomes Ram Dass and he's this spiritual teacher and he's been, working with people up until a couple of years ago. He passed away. And he has these two quotes that have stood out to me, right? One of them is like, we're all just sitting around the fire together, right? Like life is just this experience that we're all here to experience with each other. And we're in some ways, like spiritually, we're all just sitting around the fire. And I don't know if you guys have sat around a fire. It's like mesmerizing when you're hanging out with friends and you're just kind of relaxing. Like what a vibe. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And the second quote he has is like, we're all just walking each other home. Like that's what life is. And those really stood out to me. I'm sure I'm going to be your only guy on this podcast referencing like psychedelic.
No, this is good. I didn't realize we're going here. I
didn't either. This was not. Yeah, we're like session notes, 3D movement and strength, and now we're talking about like these spiritual experiences, right? But in some ways, training for me with other individuals, like it is that, like that's the importance of life in some ways is like, again, just walking each other back and helping them discover who they are and what's important and how to do difficult things and believe in themselves. And for me, training is how I deliver that experience to other people. The final thought is like, JT, you asked me like, how do I help people identify their light, right? I had this thought, and a shout out to my guy Bryant Ferrati. He's a strength coach at University of Portland. He's got his own podcast. We just have like the deepest conversations. Like I'll see him in a parking lot and we'll be talking like an hour later, just still standing there talking about just like the deepest things. And he's got this idea of like, who are you becoming? Like like people think about like, oh, I want to be this, I want to be that. And really the reality is like the decisions you make are a vote or a step in the direction of who you're becoming, right? It's not just about like who you want to be, like take an active role in that. And in regards to that, like, I think that when you're born, like that's who you are, right? Like in some ways you're born the finished product, but you go through life and you have these experiences, good and bad, and they kind of like muddy up who you were, right? Like your feelings are hurt, something happened, you got cut from a team, whatever, right? Like you're dealt bad cards in life, and that kind of like piles shit on you in some ways. And then you spend at least if you're aware enough and curious enough, right, you spend the rest of your life figuring out who you really were, and you're becoming that person through the decisions that you make, right? And so like back to training, the periodization is great, the training plans is great, like learning all this movement and biomechanics and force plates, like all that stuff's awesome, and I'm super interested in that. But like the DNA of it for me is to help people figure that stuff out, right? And connect in a way that empowers them and encourages them to be curious and figure all that out about themselves.
That's so good, man. That's
so good.
Do you have 2 extra hours, Nate? Let's lock this.
Yeah, we got some time, dude. We could keep rolling.
No, that's I think a lot of art of coaching courses, a lot of these people who speak to art of coaching, like from what I've seen, are missing that element within that piece, like getting to know and caring about your athletes or your population. And I'm right in line with you, where it can get really deep depending on how deep you want to get with yourself, right? I think it reflects how you communicate with your athletes, or how well you get to know your athletes or your population, is a reflection of how well you get to know yourself to a degree, right? I think it's really a journey or a walk home as we do that with coaching, right? And that's something like, I mean, those quotes now, it's going to be stuck in my head. Like, Phil, we're about to go on a round of fire.
JT's going to say it on every episode. On every episode for like the next 10 weeks, JT's going to say one of those quotes.
But, man, I'll tell
you. Love it, man.
No, I mean, like, with that in mind, going from 4D to 3D, you mentioned 3D, going to training.
Love that transition.
Right. Variety, novelties. That's something I've been like struggling, or just it is challenging for me to incorporate within a session. And I see you and guys like Mike G do it really well, to where it creates an environment for the athletes to have a good experience, at the same time still, following some principles in periodization. So like, let's start there with 3D strength, 3D athleticism. What is it? How do you do it?
Yeah. So I think within sport, right? And actually, I don't think, I know within sport, right? Like sport is played in multiple planes. It's not just sagittal, right? Or it's not just frontal, or it's not just transverse. All movement is a combination of those 3 planes of motion happening at the same time in different places. So deadlifting is great. Squatting is great. Like benching, whatever, any of those movements are great. But at the end of the day, it's just teaching my athlete to be stronger in some of those lifts. I need to teach them how to apply that strength and force in multiple dimensions, right? Or multiple planes of motion. And that's really where like the 3D strength comes from. I need to be able to move in full range of motion, get whatever depth I need to in a variety of ways. And I try to describe, I guess, the directional emphasis of this is like, if you imagine a clock, right? And you got 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 and 9, you got everything in between. Like, I need to be able to move in all those directions. So we might just do plyometrics, bounds, hops, jumps in a variety of directions. We might lunge, like we're going to get creative, and it might be stuff that happens in like our warm up. It might be stuff that happens in our plyometric and speed block. It might be stuff that happens in strength and auxiliary. But it's loading guys in ways that maybe aren't as commonly loaded within the strength room, and exposing them to variety of loads at different speeds, at different durations, at different ranges of motion. So they feel good and comfortable there, and they're ready to experience their sport.
Yeah. I love that. I love the definition. I love the breakdowns. That's, you hear people say that, movement planes don't actually exist, because of, you know, how variable movement can be, and people, especially in sport, like how variable people's movement solutions can be. But, you know, and looking at some of the stuff that you do, you know, it seems like you will do some like, you know, quote unquote objective testing as far as like just
Totally.
pure outputs go, right? So looking at like kind of movement jump on force plays, looking at iso mid thigh pull, like things like that. How do you like find that balance and almost like marry those two concepts of like, hey, here's just like your general objective outputs. Like here's how you generally interact with the ground on a force plate. And then here's, I don't want to say necessarily more specific. I guess you could argue it definitely is more specific to sport, but like more variable with some of these like 3D movement concepts.
Yeah. I think, you know, for the athletes, they're going to invest a ton of time and even money, right, to train with us and you know, be with us over certain periods of time. And I want to be able to show them, like, look, this is where you were and this is where you are now. You know, like they obviously subjectively feel those differences and they go, hey man, I feel so bouncy or whatever. My change of direction is great. My ability to stop and separate. But you know, with some of these tools, we're able to measure that, you know. So for the force plate, um, you know, being able to show them different jumps and how their elasticity is improved, like MRSI, how their jumping height has improved. If there's asymmetries, right, we can see right versus left. We can go, hey, look, you're way more balanced now. Your ability to stop is more efficient. You know, doing mid thigh pulls on there, we can go, hey, you're producing more force and your time to peak force has decreased. So you're now producing force faster, right? And they feel that, but now I can show them like by how much, you know. So I think that's really the driver with the metrics is like I want to be able to show you guys, you know, not just have you feel it. What was the other part of the question? Like how to marry that with
so basically like how do you marry that with 3D movement then, I guess, like
yeah,
knowing that it's hard to, I guess, objectively test that
totally.
stuff, even though like I fully agree, like it's 1000% extremely important.
Yeah. So I guess going back into that is I think as athletes improve their ability to move in three planes and do so efficiently, and they progress in load or speed, that enhances the metrics on the force plates or the other tests that we're doing, right? So I do these baseline tests in the beginning of whenever they check in for training, right? If they're doing off season, which guys are still getting back from college, I'll hit like a battery of tests right off the bat. And then we're not training to improve the test. The training improves the test. You know what I mean? Like the 3D stuff gets them better at that because they can now produce force in different ways that they couldn't before. And some of the training in some ways is how do I say it? Like it requires improvement of the abilities that the tests are testing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Did I say that the right way?
Yeah, I'm with. I think I'm following, and I like that got me fired up. I think like traditionally when we look at testing, right? It's like, or when we look at training in general, we're doing the, you know, well, for lack of a better term, we'll call it the 2-dimensional stuff to improve the 3-dimensional stuff. And I think, you know, even for myself, it's hard not to make the test the thing, right?
Yeah.
It's so easy to forget the actual goal. Like you said, the goal isn't mid thigh pull. They're not competing in an ISO mid thigh pull competition. I hope not. That's kind of weird. But like they're competing in sport, right? So, you know, saying that you're using the 3D stuff, you're using that aspect of training, and it's showing up in improvements in the general testing, like feels like a different progression than from like a lot of folks are doing it, in that they're, let's just get really good at squatting and jumping bilaterally and then hope that improves the 3D stuff.
Totally. Yeah.
Have you seen any, or have you had instances where like you here's a baseline measurement, say your counter movement or not non-counter movement jump. You go through a 4, 6, or 8 week type of program that you have, including all of these different variables of 3D movement or anything, any other abilities that you wanted to make sure they improve with throughout the program. Have you seen like a drop off in those measurements, but a subjective outcome of like I feel better?
I think last summer, before we had force plates and we were doing our best with some of the other measurement technology that we have, but um, it definitely had some variability in it. So I've seen that happen, and the question kind of becomes like, was there a testing error type deal, right? So like, since we've had the force plates for the most part, everybody's improved, which is super exciting to be able to see and be able to show. I think the times where we're seeing maybe not as much improvement in certain tests is the kids like played a game the night before and they came in, they're like super fatigued and sore and tired, or B, we potentially didn't cue it the right way. And so if I cue a test slightly differently, then all of a sudden their metric improves in the way that we want to see it, right? Which is like the power of how we tell athletes to do things. You know what I mean? Like the art of coaching. How do we communicate what we want them to do in a way that doesn't give them too much information, but also like encourages the outcome that we want to see?
Yeah. Intent is tough.
Yeah.
Intent is tough to pull out of athletes for lack of a better term. But yeah, that's something I've been trying to figure out too, because I have a vertical jump class that I teach, from time to time, and the outputs of the test itself, when I look at it, I'm like, man, there's definitely a testing error, because they're telling me they feel better. They're telling me they feel bouncier, but your jump just dropped 2 inches. I'm like, I hope you don't.
Yeah, you're like, no way.
Yeah. So no, it's something I've been trying to figure out of like, what are the other confounding variables? Is it the training? Is it the novelty and variability that I've been putting too much, and that's causing issues within the test itself? But I like what you mentioned of like, and I think you said it, Phil, like the goal is not the test, but the goal is the what comes from the output itself, or something along those lines, where we forget it's not the number really. It's it's a way for us to understand on what to do next. So
totally.
Yeah.
What do you guys use to measure for like vertical tests?
I have a jump mat. I still use that for my purposes, but I've switched into a Vertec. That one just
nice.
looks like you jumped higher, from an athlete's point of view. Like, all right, I touched the yellow this time. Now I got the blue,
Yeah.
Touched the yellow when I first got in, and then now I have the blue. So I think that means more than seeing like from a number jump from 24 to 26 on the mat, right? So
totally.
Yeah, I've been trying to play around with data, and then who cares about data and who doesn't. What's something that drives intent, which are all like what you said, the art of coaching. How do we do that? I mean, and also understanding, all right, what'd you do the night before? Those matter too.
Yeah. How'd you sleep?
Right.
Like
literally.
someone got 3 hours of sleep the night before, they're gonna of course jump worse.
Yeah.
So it's
in my head, I'm like, hey, have your worst night of sleep the night before, so that way, whatever we do after, you probably get better.
You're getting way better.
Yeah. Totally. Totally.
Dude, JT, that's so interesting though. Like, I wouldn't have thought, you'd think, all right, jump mat, maybe easier data for you. People will get into it, but like, I don't know, like the human mind, the psychological aspect of training is so wildly interesting.
Yeah.
That it's like, no, I'd rather just like jump and touch something. Like
totally.
that feels way better actually. This is a better test for us.
Well, but you think like external cueing, right? Like they have this external focus as opposed to like looking down at the mat and focusing on landing. Like that's what I've seen, right? Like I've used jump
100%.
mats and something called a G flight, which is like kind of a uh, uh, laser system that you put on the ground. And you got to jump on a line and land on the line, and those are always lower than a Vertec, where they don't have to worry about where they're landing and they can just jump and reach and try to get as high as you can. And like, man, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I'd run around and we'd just like try to jump and touch stuff, like you're at the airport, you're like, can I touch that sign?
Exactly.
Your mom's like, please don't, and you just go for it, right?
No, for sure. It's tough because like the numbers matter for us for sure, and to see what qualities we probably need to improve on in the next few weeks. But at the same time, intent switches once you have the different implementation, right? If you have a mat, I see my guys are looking down the whole time. Your hips are, there's no hip extension here, so it's not really a jump. But then if you ask me and Phil to offer us $100 and see who could touch the rim first, like that's going to be your truest intent to some degree, right?
Yeah, I wish I had a budget for that. Like
that would go
every test day, maybe $100.
That would go crazy. People would be going jumping out the gym.
Yeah,
totally.
Set world records. It's funny you mentioned curiosity earlier, like whether it's being curious about ourselves and our past experiences, or being curious about our athletes, who they are and their current experiences, and trying to relate to them. But I think about that, like those forms of external cueing or external focus, or manipulating the task or manipulating the environment in a way like to jump and touch something as like a means of engaging that in training to a certain extent, like for kids, let's just feed into that. Like, let's give them more of that. For adults, it's like they never do that. Like, let's try to awaken that thing.
Yeah,
it's still in there somewhere. Like, let's try to awaken that. And JT's shaking his head because I'm talking about play. And
no.
I keep finding my way to talk about it.
I'm saying that's spot on, because like we were all babies at some point, like what Nate says. So it's how do we do that? But yeah, talk about play. It's fine. I like play.
But I feel like with Nate, what you said earlier, with like youth athletes, high school athletes, are training getting so structured, right? It's like you got your this block of times for strength conditioning and this block of time is for skills, and you're doing what you're seeing your favorite athlete do, you're seeing your favorite pro athlete do, and it's not as fun and exploratory and engaging. Is that kind of something you keep in mind with your groups?
Yeah. I'm guilty of at times, I don't want to say being like too monotonous, right? But being very structured in some ways, right? Of like, hey, this is what we're doing. And I'm doing a 3D lunge matrix, but I'm doing it for 4 weeks with, progression in reps or sets over the 4 weeks, or, hey, you're grabbing a heavier Viper or whatever. Right. And I'm doing, my goal this summer is to offer more variety within that, and more play even. I do think there's like qualities that you can get out of different games that, like, well, if you can just get the right people playing the right game, like they're having so much fun, and it enhances the rest of the session so much, but it's like making sure that it's the right game, and you're getting what you want out of the game. It's not, you're not playing the game just for the sake of like, all right, guys, let's kill 15 minutes and play spike ball, but it's like, hey, today's a multi-directional day. We're going to play tag, you have 20 seconds to tag 5 people within this area. You're right. Ready, go. And everyone gets a chance to do that. Right. And now they're all super warmed up. Everybody's having fun. Nobody's not smiling. Nobody's in a bad mood because, something happened yesterday or this morning before they got in, and then the session's better. And now we got like a multi-directional stimulus. Right. So, I don't know. I think there's a place for fun in the training session, but it's not just for the sake of having fun. right? Like there's got to be something in my mind that we're tying it to, that we're working on.
Yeah, for sure.
That's where I go with that.
Ooh. Games. Sorry, Phil. With you said the right person with the right game. Is there a certain personality trait that you look for a specific type of game?
I find that the the female athletes that I work with aren't fans of tag. They just don't
Fair.
like playing tag, right? Where the guys love playing tag. I don't know what it is about that, but I just, like you go, all right, guys, we're playing tag, and the girls are like, what? And it's just like not the vibe you wanted to get out of it. And the guys are just like, I can't get them to stop playing. I'm like, guys, we need to go lift weights now.
Isn't it on ESPN? There's literally a tag on ESPN, like
I think
parkour.
so. Or,
I think so.
Yeah, the balloon game with like parkour too. Like, have you seen that stuff? It's like
a weird setup room.
Yeah, there'll be like a car in there and a couch, and it's like when we were kids, right? I'm sure you guys played that, and someone just like remembered and was like, "Oh, let's monetize this,"
Right.
But yeah, the guys love tag, the females don't. They tend to. So I didn't mean that generally, but the females that I'm working with don't like tag, right? But they seem to like reaction games. So think like you get a dowel, you balance it, get ready and switch positions, and you're kind of sprinting to the other dowel, trying to catch it before it drops. Like the female athletes are like, hey, can we warm up with that today? And it's like, sure. Like now they're feeling like activated and they're happy. They got something they wanted to do, like you think about the autonomy component and like decision making, like how do you afford your athletes choices throughout a session, right? And it might just be as simple as like, well, what do you want to do in the warm up today?
Sure.
And hey, you've been locked in, you earned it. Like, what are things that we need to do? I remember my volleyball group came to me one day and they're just like, we want to lead warm up today. And I was like, all right,
what'd they do?
Go for it. I mean, they hit all our stuff. We do like, we work on feet. So we do different foot walks, barefoot, dynamic flexibility. We do locomotion patterns, and they're just kind of like, all right, let's do this one. Let's do that one. And I'm like, great. And then they're almost like proud of themselves. They're like, yeah, we got it. I'm proud of them. I'm like, cool. You've been locked in over the past 4 months. You know how to warm each other up, and, I think, we all would recognize there's certain things that we need to do in our warm up relative to what we're going to do in our training session. And like from that instance, maybe what they did wasn't perfect, but they like checked every box of all the things that we want to be checking, And so like, that was cool. That part is cool to see.
And that's like a skill that could take forever.
Totally.
Like thinking about, like warming up and re-warming up over the course of a weekend volleyball tournament.
Yeah.
Back when I was working with volleyball, what do you do to warm a back up for your next game? And then just like, I don't know, like eat some snacks and then just start jumping as hard as I can.
Yeah. Jog around the court.
Yeah. So that it's like, oh, well, true. Maybe they can take not every piece, but, now they have the ability, the general knowledge to know like, hey, X, Y, and Z movements that we do all the time with coach, like make me feel good in a certain way. So now I can just take that and plug that in whenever I need to feel that way, or whenever I need to, change how I'm feeling.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's part of like what we're hoping to accomplish and what we're doing, right, is teach people the life skills of how to take care of their bodies. Actually, funny story that popped in my head because of that. When I was with Corporate Wellness, I had one client who scheduled a one-on-one with me to learn the world's greatest stretch. And we literally did it for an hour straight. Like he like wouldn't let me move on. I was like dying. I'm going, okay, man, like I'm so happy. I'm so happy you want to learn how to warm up. I'm like, but this is killing me, dude. 60 minutes of a world's greatest stretch.
That is hilarious.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Oh my goodness.
Changed that man's life though. He's probably still doing it.
I hope so, man. I
He
hope he's not
just
still confused. He's like, so the same
damn.
arm,
Spent
same
6
hand.
months.
Yeah. I need
He's
a
like-
follow up. I'm like, no, you do not. Someone else, please.
Oh my god! I mean that's a movement though. I love just like demoing it
Yeah.
once and just like throwing it out to a group and just like I can't wait to see what the hell is gonna happen here.
Yeah, right. Some of coaching that I've found can be effective, right? Is just honestly this cue of figure it out.
Yeah.
It's obviously not like, hey, really heavy deadlift, figure it out. There's like
Yeah.
low risk
Yeah.
in the movements that we're talking about, but it's like, hey man, you got to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like figure out how to move your body in this way.
What other movements would you say can fall under that category? Like if we just exclude all the heavy loads
Yeah.
from that standpoint.
Two recently that I've been working with in one of the basketball groups is certain rolling patterns. So we've been doing this roll where you have a band extended overhead, right? And I will tell them elbows or arms need to stay overhead, feet and arms off the ground. You need to roll over and roll back, and you can't let your feet or elbows touch the ground. And like what I'm trying to get them to do is connect their shoulders to their hips, right? And like engage their core and deep core musculature and be able to roll over and roll back. But a lot of them struggle. Hey, how do I do this? And it's like, hey man, you got to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like we're only doing 3 reps. Figure it out. Another one that I took from Bobby Stroop was sit in like a butterfly position, and you're holding your feet and kind of pushing into your hands with your feet and tensing up your body, and you're going to roll over one side over your shoulder and wind up facing the other way, like rolling all the way around and sitting back up. And so like the first week it looked like a bunch of like drunk babies, like they just would like fall over, right? And like now, a couple weeks later, we've done it a couple times, and now they figured it out. And it's like, the skill that it's teaching, one is like problem solving with movement solutions, and the others is like within that, how to like use musculature that maybe I don't normally connect with and use, and find a way to like tense it up and relax it and get my body to move again. Like that's 3-dimensional training, right? Is like, can I contract and relax in certain areas that I don't commonly do and do it efficiently?
That's good. I was about to say, let me see a coach, but I think it's a perfect example of like, how we as young coaches, we try to explain the movement that we want them to do as best as we can. And I'm over here, I'm locked in with you, right? I'm listening intently. I know movements. I know my right to left sometimes, and I still can't even picture what you're trying to tell me, right? So I think that's an example of like show is like demoing is top tier in how to coach, right? And getting people to do what we need them to do. And I'm gonna have to try it now. I'm just gonna look like a drunk baby in the next class.
It's a good one. It's fun. People have fun when they're doing it. They're laughing, and they're also working hard. And I think that's the type of experience you want to provide, right? Sure. It doesn't need to just be like super serious and like, oh, all I do is heavy lifts, and I get mad before I lift to lift heavy things. Like it's like, no, dude. Like training should be a good time,
right?
So sometimes, it's interesting, right? Like sometimes a reflection from an athlete is like, oh, it's not hard enough here. And it's like, no, not everything has to be hard. You know what I mean? Like things can be challenging, and it's not like a 400-pound deadlift.
Sure.
Yeah.
And things can be fun, and you can get better. And, that's the environment that we want to provide our athletes. It needs to be competitive, right? But it also needs to be very like, enjoyable, or else kids don't want to come back. But there is that like old school mentality of like, everything we do needs to be hard, or else I'm not getting better.
Sure.
And it's like, no, that's not how it is, you know?
And I think it's up to us on how we define that, right? So that's really good. I think it's like you're doing a 25-pound goblet reverse lunge. You don't need to be hyped up to do this. You can still smile. Yeah. You can still smile. Totally. But before we take us out of the deep sea, I know we started with some deep questions on you. Phil, do you have anything else that you wanted to tap into with Nate before we get into the fun?
No, let's keep the fun rolling. My brain is just like going a million different directions. Cool. I'm like already stoked to like listen to this back, but also stoked to roll around. I was rolling around on the ground this morning, so I'm stoked to roll around on the ground. So
I roll around with my dog all the time.
There you go.
Yeah. Speaking of fun, let's get into some rapid fire cues. I don't think we sent you any, maybe a few, but I added some quick ones. Every time we do rapid fire questions, I'm like, wait, these are not rapid fire. These are like actual deep questions. So I'm gonna keep them quick. You can explain if you'd like, but otherwise, just a quick 1-2 hit if you'd like. Vipers or water bags?
Vipers. I'm a big Viper fan. I recently got to meet Michol, who's the creator of them, and he's a super brilliant guy. And it was just kind of like happenstance that the conference I was going to, like, he was a speaker, and I was excited to go listen to him speak. But this guy that I met from the Gray Institute just happened to be there, which was a surprise. And he was talking to Michol, and he remembered me, and he calls me over to just like meet Michol. Michol was super chill. So it was just like, again, brilliant guy. The variability of water bags is great. But the sturdiness of the Viper, and then you have the progression and variability of weights and load within those, that I think that provides you more of a different training stimulus and options and creativity. I think the imbalance of the water bag can limit some of the things that you want to do with them. Like and I don't mean that in like a bad way of the water bag, right? But like, it's stability training, essentially, is what we're using the water bag for. The Viper can be stability training. It can be explosive training. It could be, like heavier load. It's the force velocity curve. I'm a big Viper fan, so I'll leave it at that.
Hit us with their discount code if you got it, bro.
I'll connect you guys for sure.
Top 3 artists on your playlist.
Oh, man, we get into debates about this with some of our groups all the time. Probably in no particular order. J. Cole. I really liked his most recent album, Might Delete Later. Russ has been speaking to me in some of his albums a bit more recently, and he's got some pretty deep stuff. And some of the basketball guys give me heat for that claim, but I'm like, you're not listening to it, so don't talk to me, man. Yeah, exactly. Listen to the words. And man, who else? I guess I liked Future's album that came out recently, but it's more his vibe than his lyrics. As half the time I don't even think he knows what he's rapping about. So
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, respect that. But that's what I'll say.
Yeah. Now you might be the second. I think Nate's the second person to talk about Russ. Who's second or third? I'm pretty sure it was Joey.
Oh, Joey.
Go listen. Have you guys listened to his Santiago album?
No.
Oh man, it's so deep.
We've been sleeping on Russ.
Honestly, Mike Posner is up there too, which his Keep Going album was it came out 2020-ish, I think.
Okay.
And like that's a super deep album. When he like wrote it when he was walking across America, and like that does it for me too. Like it's both those are on that same wavelength of kind of like self-discovery, self-love, healing. taking care of yourself, helping other people do the same. And I guess that's kind of been my vibe as of late.
Okay. I like that. Mike Posner, Russ, Future, and J. Cole. I feel like you got to categorize those in like one's few are in the headphones only, and a few are like can be in the gym speakers.
Yeah,
you know?
Totally.
Totally. Strictly for me. This is just for me.
Yeah, it's for
just
me.
For me. Kettlebells or fat bells?
Fat bells.
Fat bells.
Big fat bells. The way that the weight fits around your hand, and the comfort of that, I think allows you, or I should say, allows the athlete to do just as much as the kettlebell without maybe some of the discomfort that the pressure of the kettlebell gives the athlete, right? You think about like Turkish get-ups, and athletes are always like, my forearm, it's uncomfortable. And you're just like, all right, man, like get over it. Like you don't get any of that with the fat bell, right? Same with like swings. Instead of the swings going bell between your legs, you can do a 2-arm swing where the fat bells go outside of your body. And I find athletes almost like figure that one out better or more efficiently, even though it's, basically the same movement. And then you can add like reaches and things like that with the fat bells where, I just think more options and comfort there. But, both are great. We have both in our facility.
Yeah. Yes. I was really just debating on which one I should buy next. So that was my personal question. I'm like, all right, I'm locked in for
Get the fat bells, man. Fat bells. Yeah.
Open turf or a full gym with equipment?
Ooh. Well, does a full gym have turf in it? Like what are we talking about? Full gym? Are we're talking like the Exos full gym or
no?
Turf,
YMCA, selectorized equipment.
Yeah,
probably turf. Then I think it depends what's in that full gym.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a tough question.
All right. Something you've changed your mind on recently?
Yeah. Okay. So I think basketball over the past year has like popularized the like contract, relax, kettlebell drops, and hitting like positions like that with like pace and tempo. And I think initially I looked at those and I didn't think they were like dumb, but I was like, I don't know if like there's a reason for me to put that in my program.
Like a drop catch?
Like,
is that what
like a drop, like a drop catch. Or, like another thing that I've taken is something called a pivot, right? And pivots are essentially like lunging from, let's say like your left foot is forward and you're stepping through to your right foot in front, right? So I'm going from like a left foot reverse lunge position to a right leg forward lunge position. So my left foot never leaves the ground, right? It's just my right foot going back and forth. I used to kind of look at that stuff as like filler work. And now I'm starting to include it more in adding it to kind of like the 3D stimulus, so to speak, of like learning how to flow and move in different planes. Like I can do that same thing in a frontal plane or a transverse plane. Same with the catches. Like there is value to being able to contract or relax and then contract and kind of go back and forth. But how I'm teaching that to my athletes is, there should be an emphasis on how efficiently and quickly I can turn the muscles off and drop and catch the weight. It's not just this like rhythmic alternating one position to the next position, and I'm doing that for 30 seconds. It should, like, there should be an intent behind how fast am I relaxing and contracting.
That's called like COVID workouts right there. The forward reverse lunge, like everybody was doing that.
Yeah,
that was a big COVID move for sure. Just burn them.
Totally. Yeah, so like we're not doing that to burn them up when we're using it, right? Like I am using Vipers, or we're using bands to like over speed them into that, and it's like hey, can you decelerate more efficiently, and can you flow between these positions against and with resistance, or can you become stable when we're putting the Viper in certain positions, like over the lead leg where it wants to side bend me in the frontal plane, or a rotational reach, and I need to be stable as I dissociate shoulders and hips as I'm going through lunge positions. And so like that's where I now see more value in some of that stuff. Where before I didn't, I was like, oh, that's not very important. Like that's filler, and so I've changed my mind on some of that.
I like that. I like that.
Love
cool. One more last question. I'm gonna start to toss around a little bit, and I'll give it back to Phil because I know he wants to land this plane before we do before we do a 3-hour Rogan, which he'll never let me.
I'm not gonna let you do a 3-hour show, JT. I'm not gonna
let Hey, if you guys do, I want to be a part of it. That'd be great.
They will be there. They will be there.
Let it roll.
Kobe, Bron, MJ.
Oh, man, what a tough question. Okay, so I'm from Southern California, and all my friends were Laker fans growing up. And JT, are you a Laker fan?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah? How obnoxious are you about the Lakers? Because my guys were so obnoxious to the point where I hated the Lakers growing up, and I would hate on Kobe and whatnot.
Yeah.
Now that I'm an adult and I'm slightly more mature and can reflect on some of that stuff, man, I might put Kobe as one. I might go Kobe one.
I know I picked you. I know why. My favorite episode.
Which as a kid, I don't know if I ever would have said that, but I think the whole like Mamba mentality and like even though I hated him growing up, like that whole mentality was impactful to how I went about things I did in my life, right? And I think that impacted many people in the world. And the world is a better place for people having that mentality. And so it's like more than just a basketball thing, which is why I put him probably number one. Statistically, LeBron is the best out of the three, right? And so like that's a tough argument to not put him number one.
That's what I'm saying,
but
JT.
I might have to just go MJ LeBron in that order.
Wait, we just turned around on this.
Yeah, I know. I don't know, man. It's tough. It's tough. It's such a tough question. What you guys give me yours? Yeah, I'm gonna say. I mean, give me yours in a second, but I'm gonna say Kobe, MJ, LeBron, which I'm sure I'll get heat for, but I don't really care.
Yeah, Phil.
You know,
I might go Bron, MJ, Kobe. I'm sorry to both of you.
That's fine.
I'm a Sixers fan, man. Kobe ruined my life, so
like, AI was my favorite player growing up. You know what I mean? So I hear you.
It's iconic. But yeah, I think I go Bron, MJ, Kobe.
Okay.
Kobe ruined my childhood. So
no, this could be like another hour combo for me, but obviously Kobe. I should rewind. I think defining greatness first. This is the first thing. I think greatness as a whole, Kobe. Mm-hmm. Who's greater in winning? MJ, 6 of the 3, right? 3, 6, 5, 4. Greatest from a basketball statistic standpoint. I should do more research, but I think, obviously Bron's number 1 scoring, but MJ's up there with like a whole bunch of other statistics that are not even close to everyone else, like defense player of the year and all those things that come with that. So it's tough. It's going to be, it's a conversation for sure, but greatness, like as a whole, a human, I think I'm right with Kobe just from the start to the finish of his career. So
totally.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I'm not mad at either of your answers, man. They all make sense. They're all
for
great.
For a second, I thought JT
ways.
was just gonna ride the fence. I didn't think you were gonna give an answer, JT. I thought you were just gonna hang out.
Nah. I have a different thought process here, but Kobe's always gonna be the best in every category, So I'm gonna chill with that. Let's put that in another podcast.
Table that for the 3 hour. That'll be the the 3-hour round table. We just talk about that for 3 hours. bring some guests on. But Nate, this was an absolute blast, brother. Thank you for coming on. One thing we started asking people out of our own curiosity to finish off the show. But what's next for you, man? What do you got coming down the pipeline? What do you got excited? I know you mentioned summer programs starting to kick off, but what you got going on?
Yeah, that's gonna really demand probably most of my time over the summer. I'm trying, I'm excited to learn some more things coming up. I don't know if you guys follow, I think it's Hunter Eisenhower. He's with Arizona State. He's got this concept called the force system that's coming out, and he uses force plates a lot, and he defines kind of training stimuluses by the forces that the athlete encounters. So I'm really excited to learn that. Learn more about force plates. I'm currently working on the SFMA, and
Nice.
I have an idea that who knows where it'll go, but I'm looking to kind of combine the lens of force plates, the SFMA, and like what Exos used to call the global movement themes, right? And I after leaving Exos, that stuff was really influential in like how I look at movement and learning some of that stuff. And so I ended up going to the Gray Institute and taking their GIF mentorship, which is like
nice.
40 weeks long, and just so much information, right? And that's the lens of the global movement theme actually kind of comes from the Gray Institute's transformational zones within GATE. And so I think there's probably something there in terms of seeing certain metrics on the force plate, right versus left, eccentric versus concentric, how it relates to the TZ1 or TZ2 or the extension rotation and flexion rotation that can then be broken down through the SFMA to kind of treat and correct and enhance and reintegrate back in. So I that's kind of like my big goal of like, how can I marry those things all together and make it make sense and kind of further my lens of how I look at that stuff. I think I spoke to Stefan when the global movement theme stuff was really coming out. And there's this idea that I have that it's not mine originally, but I've kind of taken it and enhanced it with the global movement theme of this idea of finding center, right? So like in movement, you're trying to find center of all your degrees of freedom to be balanced and have the most movement options to be successful in what you're doing, right? As you lose active range of motion within those, you rebalance and recenter within your new parameters of what range of motion you can access, right? Which is then where compensation comes in. Because man, I have less external rotation in my left hip, so I'm shifting and I'm getting myself into a place where I can still access external rotation in my left hip by being more internally rotated into my left hip, right? Instead of the balance centered position, right? And so like you take extension rotation right, extension rotation left, flexion rotation left, flexion rotation right, and through all that degrees of freedom, you have a center for your anatomical position, right? And that's how I'm looking at movement for individuals. And I want to like enhance that perspective within force plates, SFMA, and knowing like the rate and speed of how certain joints need to move and in what order, and getting into kind of that global movement theme lens, I guess. Long answer. Sorry.
We gotta talk off air. We gotta talk. I've been doing a lot of work on that. We gotta talk off air. So we don't clear our pod this. We'll definitely talk off air because
let's do it.
I've been doing a ton of work on that recently for us. But damn, this has been a blast. Almost teeter on the edge of rolling into just keeping this going for a couple more hours. But we'll definitely have to have you back. I feel like
would love to.
We just scratch the surface on. But where can people connect with you, learn more about what you got going on, find you?
Yeah. So, I mean, social media is the easiest way. I'll respond for the most part, unless it's some weird message. But yeah, Instagram zero is my Instagram handle, spelled with my last name, Graham. But yeah, that's you can find us. You can find me there. We got stuff on our Rokke social media, which is Rokke at Rokke.pt. Um, yeah, I think all our coaches are doing great things, and um, getting to see kind of our Rokke system in action through the lens of each one of our coaching is a pretty cool thing that we got going on.
Hell yeah, man. Well, to all listeners out there, make sure you follow Nate, connect with Nate, shoot him a DM with some questions if you have any. Show him some love on IG. Show the show some love, and Nate, again, we'll definitely have to have you on at some point in the
Yeah,
future,
would
man.
love to.
This is awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
appreciate
this
you,
was
Nate,
great,
man.
man.
It's
Thanks for having me
fun.
on, guys.
Yes, sir.
Had a
care,
great
brother.
time.
Part 2
Cool.
coming soon.
Yeah. See you.